네, 여러분 그러면 이제
Without delay, we are going to start the third day of Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum. Once again, let me introduce myself to you. I am Kyung-mi Kim, serving as your MC today. It's such a great morning. Thank you so much for being here with us. And we had session 1 and 2. We talked about the peace on the Korean Peninsula and the new global order. And today in session 3, we are going to talk about the policies of Northeast Asian countries and also the peace on the Korean Peninsula. And I hope that greater wisdom can be collected by all the participants here today. Now, let me welcome our moderator, Mr. Shin, onto the stage. And I'd like to invite the two speakers from Tokyo University, Kimiya Tadashi-san, and also Professor Peck, who is Professor Emeritus from Yonsei University, onto the stage. Hello, everyone. I am going to lead the session with the topic on the East Asian international politics and peace on the Korean Peninsula. My name is Bong-gil Shin. I am working at the Korea Council on Foreign Relations. Thank you so much for inviting me and giving me this important role as a moderator at the Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum. I spent my 40 years at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and my last position was the ambassador to India representing the Republic of Korea. So throughout my career, foreign affairs related to Northeast Asian countries and also North Korea, and I was responsible for KEDO, and I was part of the six-party talks representing our country. And Korea-China-Japan relations was one of the responsibilities at TCS, which was established, and I was the founding member of the TCS. That's why I guess I was invited as the moderator to lead the session 3 with topic on East Asian international politics and peace on the Korean Peninsula. As you may well know, the world is going through changes, and especially through the new global order, and we are going through chaotic changes. The liberal international order is being shaken up, and with the inauguration of the second Trump administration, the free economic order is being crumbled, and the democratic movements are taking backsliding around the world as well. And democracy and authoritarian territories, the lines that used to divide those two are becoming blurred. And the US-China rivalry is getting worsening. So there are many concerns around the world over the trade issues and other matters as well. And East Asian countries are located at the forefront of such changes. There are wars waged against Ukraine and also wars in the Middle East. And if there is going to be a new war, people predict that it can take place in Northeast Asia. Some people say other regions in Northeast Asia, but other people say it could be a war on the Korean Peninsula. At this critical juncture, we really need the insights that used to be given by our former President Kim Dae-jung to live up to the meaning of the Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum. We invited experts to share their insights so that we can wade through the current challenges and welcome a new paradigm of peace. Without further ado, let me introduce our two speakers to you. Kimiya Tadashi is a professor from the Tokyo University in Japan. who is sitting right next to me. He graduated and majored in law, and he got his PhD at Korea University. He is an expert on the situation on the Korean Peninsula, relations between Korea and China, and the political situation in Northeast Asian countries. And he is very active in giving his lectures. And Emeritus Professor Emeritus Baik Young-seo from Yonsei University. He graduated from Seoul National University, majoring in advanced studies on Asia, and he has served as a long-time editor of the 창작 and 비평, which is a publication related to culture, society, politics, and economy. And he has always emphasized and encouraged everyone to move away from Westernism-centered thinking towards the universal thinking. He also received an award, Fukuoka Osaka Award, this year. And in this session, I will give 20 minutes to each speakers, and then we will spend the remainder 30 minutes by getting questions from the floor and also inviting speakers to share their comments on each other. After the two presentations, Q&A session will continue, so I'd like to ask for your active participation by asking questions. First, let me welcome Professor Tadashi.
Good morning, everyone. I'm very honored to be invited to this meaningful forum. I would like to say thank you to Dr. Baek Hak-sun and other organizers. Regarding President Kim Dae-jung, I have something to say in proud. September 2001, Reverend Kang Won-yong organized the Christian Academy a meeting, and I participated in that meeting. At that time, I thought that there is a late Koi Takako, chairperson of Japanese Socialist Party. I was there, and at that time, I was invited to the Blue House as a foreigner. That was very memorable and fond memory. As I look at the modern history of Korea, and there are Park Chung-hee and Kim Dae-jung, who are the two leaders who made a great achievement in the Korean history. They made the economic development and the political democratization so that South Korea could win in the ideological competition against North Korea. So that is my fond reflection about President Kim. So far, I have been reading. I have been calling him as a President Kim Dae-jung, but he is the subject of my research, so I will just call him Kim Dae-jung. I seek for your understanding. The purpose of my presentation is this: what will be the enduring appeal as a politician? He was able to make a balance between political realism and political imagination. There are two aspects in explaining this. First of all, his approach to the Korean Peninsula would have some relations with the Northeastern international relations and the modern history. And I would like to review on that aspect. And secondly, around 2000, Kim Dae-jung administration went through uncertainties caused by the United States, then China rivalry, and North Korean and Russian military cooperation, and North Korea is a nuclear state. So all the more Korean Peninsula is at at intention. So I would like to revisit his legacy to translate that into the current situation. So in the modern history, Kim Dae-jung was a very important figure as the opposition party leader in 1960 and after. His thought and his policy visions played a key role. First of all, as a presidential candidate in 1971, he proposed the four-power security theory. In the 1960s, Park Chung-hee's diplomacy was about the active intervention in the Cold War system in order to make up the inferior state of the South Korea compared to North Korea. However, the Cold War system has been greatly shaken in 1970s. Nixon administration decided to withdraw from the Vietnam War, and he normalized relations with China in 1972. Likewise, the Cold War system made a transition into detente in 1970s. Of course, President Park Chung-hee also wanted to actively respond to this changing situation. In 1971, Kim Dae-jung thought that China does not have any relations with Korea. At that time, China was regarded as an enemy state. However, Kim Dae-jung thought that we could not stop the rise of China, so we need to be able to take advantage of the international influence carried by China in Korea's favor. So his four-power security theory is about for Korea to make an intervention in the four-power playground, so that he made the other four powers to prevent Korea becoming a battlefield. So in that way, President Kim Dae-jung wanted to secure peace on the Korean Peninsula. That was the basic blueprint to create the peace on the Korean Peninsula. Park Chung-hee administration did not agree Kim Dae-jung's vision. The administration regarded his vision as dangerous. However, those criticism was not aligned with the Park Chung-hee administration's policy. After Park Chung-hee administration reached a joint statement with North Korea, and in 1973, a June 23rd declaration was announced to recognize North Korea as a state and simultaneously became the members of the United Nations. That means Park Chung-hee partially admitted the vision of Kim Dae-jung. So the big difference between Park Chung-hee and Kim Dae-jung is this. Kim Dae-jung just focused on the changes, and he wanted to create favorable conditions for this change to be played out. Northeastern Asian situation in the 1970s were used proactively, not passively. Those situations were used for the Korean Peninsula to have a peace settled on it. Next, since the Korean democratization, let me review how the Kim Dae-jung's vision was developed in 1990s. First of all, he looked at the experience of the German unification. Kim Dae-jung said that unification should not be through the absorption, and he made this conclusion by closely observing German unification. He noticed the dangers brought by the unification by absorption. After 1992, being defeated in the presidential election, Kim Dae-jung proposed the three-phase unification: inter-Korean federation, federated state, and into complete unification. the Inter-Korean Inter-Korean Federation could be possible under the situation of Cold War or the ideological rivalry. In order to avoid the North Korean style unification, Kim Dae-jung proposed the buffer state of Inter-Korean Federation. But however, into 1990s, Cold War was ended, and the inter-Korean dialogue or conversation became very active to produce the joint statement of denuclearization. However, all the visions was not clearly realized because the first North Korean crisis broke out. And North Korea put emphasis on its relations with United States rather than with South Korea. So North Korea focused on developing nuclear weapons development. And this crisis has been settled through the Geneva Consensus. However, the end of the Cold War could not bring any peace-backed dividend. It was a great concern. Kim Yong-sam administration wanted to still clinging to the Korean initiative in dealing with inter-Korean relations. He wanted to be equally stated in the North Korean U.S. relations or North Korean Japan relations. South Korea wants to be also the part of this grand situation. However, Kim Dae-jung had a different ideas. He wanted to take advantage of the virtuous cycle taking place outside for the Korean government's favor. Next, I would like to review the Kim Dae-jung administration. Kim Dae-jung thought that the United States has the violent nature as a great power as well as the icon of democracy and the human rights defending. During the Cold War, those U.S. government supported the dictatorship in South Korea for the American interest. For that, Kim Dae-jung actually criticized the values held by the United States. Next, I would like to review the relations with the Clinton's second administration. Unlike the Clinton first administration, the second Clinton administration was very active in promoting its relations with North Korea. So during his term, the U.S. administration was able to end the first nuclear crisis. The second term of Clinton administration highly appreciated the Kim Dae-jung's rapprochement policy. It was the basis for the Paris process. Clinton administration wanted to outsource its relations with North Korea to South Korea. However, North Korea preferred to engage with the United States and isolate the South Korea. The reading that the Kim Dae-jung administration persuaded the United States to make an active intervention in its relations with North Korea. In order to this policy to be successful, there was need that the North Korea, in dealing with South Korea and the United States, should not leave any room for the maneuvering. For that, TCOG was established. So here, the Korea, U.S., Japan made a cooperation in dealing with North Korea. It was very successful. The tripartite cooperation was enabled in deterring North Korean provocation. However, these three countries were on the same page for cooperation. That was a great achievement of Kim Dae-jung administration and second term of Clinton administration and Obuchi administration. And this was possible because these two countries had high expectation and trust onto President Kim. And in 2000, there was the first ever inter-Korean summit. State Secretary Albright visited North Korea, and Jo Myung-rok also visited the United States. President Clinton had a plan to visit North Korea, or Kim Jong-il may have a may visit the United States. However, all these plans were not realized due to the other circumstances, and with that, the possibility for the big strike on the Korean Peninsula was removed. But the Clinton administration's engagement policy was enabled because there was Kim Dae-jung administration's intermediary role in the North Korean-U.S. negotiation. Kim Dae-jung, in promoting North Korean policy, learned lessons from U.S. policy toward Vietnam, as well as Cuban policy. It was very interesting. Not only that, Kim Dae-jung also made a very painful advice to the United States, and that was very sincere. That's why Clinton really supported Kim Dae-jung's policy. Next, I would like to review its relations with Japan. There was Kim Dae-jung's perspective into Japan. Kim Dae-jung actually negatively evaluated the pre-war Japan. And also he criticized severely about the history revisionism adopted by Japan. However, with the peace constitution, Japan was completely changed afterward, and for that Kim Dae-jung made a high appreciation. And that view was shared only by a fraction or the minority within Korea. Kim Dae-jung thought that Japan's development in terms of market economy and the democracy could be a model for Korea. So he decided to make frequent exchanges with Japan, and the human exchanges will be very important. And also Kim Dae-jung was very thankful when he was to the Japanese people when he was kidnapped, or the Japanese people made a great efforts to save him when he was in danger. In October 1998, Kim Dae-jung administration and the Obuchi administration looked at the Japan's past, and they made a Japan-Korea partnership declaration. I believe that was the very beginning of real relations between South Korea and Japan. The very achievement in its relations is Koizmi's visit to North Korea. It was possible because there were accumulated efforts made by Kim Dae-jung administration. Actually, Prime Minister Koizmi visited North Korea in September 2002. They discussed the return of survived abductee, and discussed the normalization of its relations with North Korea. And these points were well captured in Pyongyang joint declaration. However, after that, the Japanese internal opinion went sour, so the Japan-North Korean negotiation could not make a real progress. However, it was still meaningful because Kim Dae-jung administration made the intermediary role in normalizing relations between Japan and North Korea. Next, about North Korean relations. Park Jong-hee said in order to have a negotiation with the dictatorship like North Korea, so he tried to justify using institutions because South Korea should be also a dictatorship in dealing with the North Korean dictators. However, Kim Dae-jung was different. Kim Dae-jung thought that Korea should be a sincere democratic country in order to deal with very different state, which is North Korea. That he thought that that will lead to the ultimate unification. Kim Dae-jung's reconciliation and cooperation policy was unconditional in improving its relations with the North Korea. Kim Dae-jung did not the top priority on unification. However, he carefully calculated how to win the best game with the smallest cost. He was a true realist. The North Korean attitude is to engage United States while isolating South Korea. In that situation, Kim Dae-jung tried not to leave any room for North Korea to maneuver the situation, and also he was able to persuade the Korean people about his approach toward North Korea, and the better relation between North Korea, the United States, and North Korea and Japan would be bringing about the peace dividend in the relationship of the with the South Korea and North Korea, and it was true because the Kim Dae-jung's North Korean policy brought about economic gains. He promoted different projects like Kumgangsan tourism projects as well as Kaesong Industrial Complex project, and it was economically beneficial to North Korea and helped Kim Dae-jung to improve its political relations with North Korea. And this relations is not the strict reciprocity. At least he allowed unilateral benefit to be obtained by North Korea. And as I said before, in this way, Kim Dae-jung made a great contribution in improving South Korean relations with North Korea, and he played the successful intermediary role in improving North Korean relations with the United States and Japan. And through this, I think that he was a catalyst for North Korea to level up its relations with the external world. And his role was possible because there was accumulated trust of Kim Dae-jung as an individual and as a government. Lastly, I would like to discuss global diplomacy, including China. Since 1960s, Kim Dae-jung thought that China would have a great significance in international relation diplomacy. Unlike the current situation, in around 2000, China had a limited power in Northeast Asia and the world. So in Kim Dae-jung diplomacy, China's proportion was not very big in its relations with China. However, he looked into the future. He focused on improving its relations with China. The noteworthy episode is that he persuaded President Clinton to visit China very actively. At that time, still President Clinton was hesitant in visiting China because there was the image from the Tiananmen Square incident. So President Clinton sought for Kim Dae-jung's advice about U.S. relations with China. At that time, the circumstance was fine to have to grow better relations between the United States and China. However, Kim Dae-jung's role was very critical in improving U.S. relations with China. And when Kim Dae-jung visited Vietnam, he made a clear apology to the damages done by Korean soldiers onto the Vietnam community. It was the other face of Kim Dae-jung's diplomacy, and this kind of achievements was well appreciated and leading to his winning of Nobel Peace Prize. Actually, I also prepared to review the current situation. So different Korean governments' achievements are compared with the Kim Dae-jung administration, and I also wanted to point out his legacy and how to translate that into the real policy and the current situation. However, due to the time constraint, I may not cover that part. Later, I hope I can be talking about this again.
감사합니다.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Professor Kimiya Tadashi. Has been in close relations with President Kim Dae-jung with topics on the Northeast Asian, national relations, and the realism and political imagination are the areas of his expertise. Kim Dae-jung, the former President Kim Dae-jung, is known to have grand dreams for realizing his political goals, but at the same time, he was known to be a realist. Especially Professor Kimiya Tadashi is focusing on 4 major power security guarantee system and North Korean coalition, unification, and very new political concepts have been covered by his professor. He was at the forefront of the agendas that will only be discussed years later. He is the person, and also together with President Kim Dae-jung, was the person who led the discussions. Those 2 Korean peace talks have been very dear to our former president. So if you have any questions to Professor Tadami, please do not hesitate. Now I'd like to invite our second speaker for this session. Now my clock says 10:07, and I will try to finish my presentation before 10:30. Here is my title. This is not a venue to share our academic papers, so for the public, I will try to be very brief with my presentation. Whenever people meet each other, they introduce themselves by sharing their names. So let me share my title of the presentation. My presentation title is Making a Narrative. I will talk to you about the 100-year-long history of East Asia. It's not just about sharing stories, but I want to tell you how narratives are being developed from the perspective of China, Japan, and Korea over the history of 100 years. How narratives were developed and shared by these 3 countries in East Asia. And as the subtitles say here, I want to approach this topic from the perspective of global, geo-regional perspective. So you must be wondering, what is this geo-regional perspective? This is about global plus regional perspectives combined. to take an integrated view of the political situation in East Asia, especially in Korea, because the three countries share a 100-year-long history together. I know this is too academic. I'm a researcher by profession, so apologies. This is a table of content. And moving on to the next slide. This is how I see the problem. We celebrate 80th year of independence this year, and we had big events that took place in August. And we remember the day as the Liberation Day. And in Japan, they remember this day as the end of the war. And some negatively remember this day as the as the day of defeat. Then this is how they remember. And if you look at, if you have heard over the media, in China on September the 3rd, they placed great importance on September the 3rd, and they had a big mega-scale events. And Putin and Mr. Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader, were invited to the 80th anniversary of victory in the war of resistance against Japanese aggression. And they called this day, September 3rd, as the day to win the war against fascism. They say it's not just the war won by one country, but this is the war of the global, from the global perspective. That's how they remember this day. These different modes of commemoration and memory were shaped within the framework of national histories. How can we develop narratives from these different perspectives? As a historian, it's not only talking about the past events. A historian's job is to think about the future as well. So let's take a look at China. Why do they place great importance on the war of resistance against Japanese aggression? They always emphasize the 100 years of subjugation and humiliation. And they say they call the 100 years of those days as the history of humiliation, but not anymore. They emphasize those days and years as the years of victory. Not only the Chinese historians, but also in the academia, they always place great importance on the victory in the war of resistance against Japanese aggression. They do not want to phrase it as the end of the colonization by the Japanese forces, but they want to frame it as the war of resistance against Japanese aggression. The way they talk about the past history through narratives, they come up with two concepts. And those are the main Eastern battlefield and the 14-year war of resistance. These are the core themes of the dominant trend in Chinese academic research on the war of resistance against Japan. Especially, there was a long-lasted war of Soviet Union and Germany, but China said that the sacrifices were not only made by countries in the West. There was another important battlefield during the Second World War in the East. That's why they emphasize the main Eastern battlefield, because many sacrifices and many fightings were carried out in the East. And we helped those fighting in the Western battlefield. That's why the Chinese academia came with the concept of main Eastern battlefield and the 14-year War of Resistance. People say that the starting point of China's anti-Japanese struggle was not the seventh incident of 1937. They want to move it back from that 1937 event to the September 18th incident of 1931. They want to emphasize that we have been suffered by the Japanese aggression of way earlier than 1937. So they want to overcome the Westernism-centered thinking. They want to promote the idea of main Eastern battlefield, and they want to put the starting point not from the 1937 but from 1931. So why now? Why are they emphasizing their victory over the Japanese aggression? That's why we have to pay attention to the main Eastern battlefield. I respect their thinking. Yes, Asia has suffered. We put up a good fight, but they have to remember not only China but Korea also went through hardships. The Korean context and perspective needs to be reflected. Otherwise, it will not be the global perspective. If they only focused on the Chinese perspective, they will not include the perspectives from neighboring countries. The Korean soldiers also went to the mainland on China to fight together against the Japanese aggression. Whether it is a left wing or right wing, soldiers from other countries went to the mainland of China to fight, to put up a fight. That's why when it comes to the history in the East Asian countries, we need to have a geo-regional perspective so that we can integrate different views not only from one country but all the countries in East Asia. So what is this geo-global perspective good for China? If they only focus on Chinese perspective, they can be criticized as a China-centric view because China is also criticizing some people having Western-oriented thinking. I also am going to write an article in the Chinese media, and some might criticize me as having Korea-centered thinking. But what I am saying is that those who fought for independence during the hard days, the theory of civilianism, they had a high level of thinking. They predicted well before how we can contribute to the democracy achieved in East Asia. So why is China emphasizing the victory in the war of resistance against Japan now? And why did it have such mega-scale September 3rd celebrations? Just as one of our speakers said, they want to take this opportunity to show it to the U.S. They want to say that if anyone picks up a fight with them, they will win over that game or fight. This is kind of a warning message being sent to the U.S., and that was said by the director Jang, who was one of the speakers yesterday. And they want to move away from the history of humiliation. They want to emphasize the history of victory against the Japanese aggression. And Cairo talks and Yalta talks. You remember the Chinese leader participated in talking about a new global order. They want to emphasize that. They want to be respected as one of the great powers. And they want to emphasize that in this new global order, they can do their job in establishing new orders for those on the mainland and also those outside China. These are the pictures of the celebrations this year. Now I know I'm running out of time, so I will be very speedy. There have been many talks and also many talks in Japan. I got some hints from Professor Nam, and what I am emphasizing is the Far East 1905 system theory. Following its victory in the First Sino-Japanese War in 1895, Japan annexed Taiwan. After the Russo-Japanese War in 1905, that's why they are highlighting the Far East 1905 system theory, and after that, one unified order has been maintained by Japan. And what does this mean? They annexed Taiwan in the First Sino-Japanese War, and they subjugated Korea after the Russo-Japanese War in 1905. And from the 1905, Japan moved toward imperialist territorial expansion, and the Far East 1905 system marked the beginning of this process. And if you look on the slide, there is a book that specifies the starting point from the annexation of Taiwan to subjugation of Korea and the imperialist territorial expansion thereafter. They tried so hard to keep the Far East 1905 system, but after losing the war in World War II, this system was dismantled. Korea, the U.S. formed alliance, and U.S.-Japan alliance also shaped. This is kind of twin alliances. So the U.S. led the alliance forming. So Japan is in the boat together with the U.S. to maintain the system they desired. And what is the driving force behind it? The Korean War. Because of the emergence of the Korean War, the Korean War kind of cemented the arrangement through agreements among the nations involved. This interpretation, maybe some people may disagree. This interpretation can be suggested by right wing, and some political party wants to keep this system, especially in the last administration. They wanted to cooperate with Japan, and they didn't talk about the past because they want to keep the twin alliance system. So we have to pay close attention how the system may evolve in the coming years. The San Francisco treaty system, I will skip this part due to the limited time. So what is Korea's vision for the regional order? There is nothing tangible to call anything as the vision for the regional order for Korea. Whenever I talk about Korea's thinking for the regional order, what alternative narrative originating from the Korean Peninsula can counter China's future vision based on the victory in the War of Resistance against Japan and Japan's vision rooted in the 1905 system? So what I can tell you is that 100 years after the Russo-Japan War, we can introduce cumulative resources to point to the ideological and practical resources that have gradually accumulated over Korea's century of transformation. This current begins with the Anjungun's theory of East Asian peace, passed through the Kimi Declaration of Independence, and extends into the present. We thought beyond the Korean Peninsula. That's what this declaration and theory mean. I use the term nation building in the style of the Korean Peninsula, but for the past 100 years, nation building in the style of the Korean Peninsula has been promoted as a framework shaped by Korea's unique modern history. There are conservative and liberal efforts, but what I want to focus on is transformative centrism. I want to take two examples: an independence activist, Jo, and Jo So-wang and Fu Gwang. So what? Kim Dae-jung. So transformative centrism. What does this mean? They say it's a transformative centralism is the strong willingness to overcome the post-Cold War divided system. And also, it is the concept to pursue decolonization and independent national building. This is not for the grand goal of transformation to create a new peninsula. Any forces can be united. That's why we call it transformative centrism, as a both, which can serve as both a methodology for solidarity and a movement strategy. So I want to talk to you about Jo So-wang as well as Kim Dae-jung. Jo So-wang served as Foreign Minister of the Provisional Government of the Republic of Korea. His job was very important. So he emphasized the concept of Samgyunism, which is an ideology that aims for equality in politics, economy, and education. It is even included in the high school textbook. But I want to divide it to the theory of politics, and I know I'm running out of time, so let me be very brief. If you look, the China talks about the East battlefield and the 40-year war, but his political situation theory goes far beyond that. In 1931, the year is not important, but when Korea was colonized by the Japanese imperial force, it already began then, way before 1931. And he used the wording like the lighthouse of the peace, Korea being the lighthouse of the peace. And he recognized that March 1st was the closing bell of the First World War and the opening bell of the Second World War. This is a very important insight. And if you look at his theory of civilization, foundation and independence can be pursued at the same time, but it's not about just having the prosperous country and a strong military. And his Samgyunju의 theory emphasizes a new democracy. capitalism and the socialism and the new political system can be blended together. That is the main essence of his civilization theory. So he has a great insight. And now let's talk about Kim Dae-jung's vision. What is most important is, just like our ambassador Shin said, his internationalism and pragmatism were fundamentally interconnected. He fused scholarly problem awareness and merchant-like realism. That's the exact words our president said. It is very important to have this kind of perception. Only with this perception of scholarly problem awareness and merchant-like realism, we can achieve transformative centrism. In this way, he extended the lineage of transformative centrism. He clearly argued that the peace on the Korean Peninsula is the core condition for guaranteeing peace in Northeast Asia, East Asia, and the world. That's why many theories were proposed that is in line with our former President Kim Dae-jung, the democracy achieved from the global perspective. He talked about the global democracy, and it was his ideal to achieve. So if there are any limitation to his ideology, it's our job to expand his philosophy and his thinking. The global political situation is very challenging. So for peace in East Asia, we need to develop a new narrative. So what could be the criteria to develop a new narrative? We should not be swept by trends. We need to utilize the resources that were accumulated over the 100 years, and we need to have narratives that can hit chord in the hearts of the public. This is a news article covered by 한겨레 on August 15th. And on the far right, that is the picture of Jo So-won, and also second to the right is Yoon Dong-ju. By looking at the pictures, I thought, oh, this is a great picture that I can use for my presentation. So I am almost nearing the end of my presentation. Please bear with us. We are at a critical juncture, and the world is also going through extreme right-wing parties. So what kind of a discourse should we participate in? Throughout the Korean Peninsula, we already have a hard power and we have a soft power. And what is important is that we have to promote peace and democracy at the same time. They are two sides of a coin. We already are a living example. And especially after the martial law declared by the former president, we saw the revolution of light candles on the street. Strategic and geopolitical risks are many. But we can go onto the street and embarrass the political leaders of their wrongdoings by holding up the light candles. That will be almost the end of my presentation, but this is a drawing done by one child living in Gangwon, and it was given as a present to President Lee Jae-myung. On the left, What you're seeing is the confrontation between the North Korean and South Korean army at the border by using the loudspeakers. And the child complains about the noise coming from the loudspeakers. But if you look closely, there is a melody coming out from the loudspeakers. And then the message is that they are very happy not to hear any noise coming from the loudspeakers with the main contents on the propaganda broadcasting to South Korea. It is important to create a satisfying living environment for all the public. And I think that is a job of all of us, and I think that is the road that former President Kim Dae-jung wanted us to take. That will be the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for your kind attention. I never saw an audience giving this big hand to a speaker at the end of the presentation. So our Professor Emeritus said a lot of things that I didn't hear before. China always reminded themselves that they cannot repeat the 100-year history of humiliation. So I guess they are moving away from the history of 100 years of humiliation. They are now focusing on the victory against the Japanese aggression in resistance to the Japanese forces. So what about Korea? Korea shall not be excluded. Korea participate together with joint forces with China in resistance against the Japanese aggression. So we have to identify such cases in our history and then share them with China. And their emphasis on the victory against the Japanese aggression, he said, was a sign being sent to the U.S. And we have to carry on the thinking of former President Kim Dae-jung, especially to achieve peace in East Asian countries. We have to develop new narratives from the perspective of Korea. And that is because Korea is the country that succeeded in promoting democracy as well as peace at the same time. A very abstractive content and very philosophical, which serve as the food for thought for all of us. We have about 15 minutes. Is there any question from the floor? We are happy to entertain any questions from the floor. So please hand over the microphone to a person who raised his hand.
Thank you, Professor Kimiya Tadashi. As I listen to you, I have a short comment and as well as a question. And until 1970s and 80s, Japan exercised global leadership, being recognized in the world. During the same time period, Germany did the same too. However, after German unification, when EU was created, the German may play the leadership, while Japan, after the war, went through the sad period in history. However, we cannot deny the leadership played by Japan. Now, the Japan's light is being dimming at the moment. Now, I would like to ask whether Japan is cleaning up its post-colonial history. Whenever new governments are coming up in China and South Korea, Japan's response to colonial misdeeds are always changing. So the different interactions between the three governments, among the three governments, is always changing. So this is the current reality in politics. So if Japan cleans up its past misdeeds during colonialization, then the three countries may find a road into peace. Of course, there were a lot of undertakings in that direction. Is there any way that Japan would not go back to its past? And for Professor Abe, I learned a lot from your presentation. China-Japan War was about colonized Taiwan. It was a past history. However, it was not about the China-Japan relations, but has to do with South Korea because Japan wants to take Korean territory for its own, and the Russia-Japan war was also taking place on the Korean Peninsula, and so after the war, the three Manchuria was created after those wars, and there should be more details to be explained about the war. So I may not reiterate the result of the Russia-Japan war, but the Russia-Japan war is not directly linked to the colonization of Japan. So more of the details should be touched upon. I am Professor Kim Gi-ok from Hansung University. Sorry to forget my introduction before asking question. Professor Kimiya. Thank you for the question. Yes, that was a very painful question to me as well. We need to be interested in the Japan's past misdeed, and Japan needs to make apology for that. But there's too much seriousness in the making apology is not necessary, I believe. However, Japan is paying its price for its misdeed. For China and South Korea, now these two countries are more powerful than Japan in a sense. So by now, Japan has to make clear about its position on its colonial misdeed. Then it will contribute to building a better relationship with China and South Korea. But on the other hand, this is a tricky issue too. While I'm in Japan, I'm living in Japan. Japan was the only advanced and democratic state during Cold War era. After that, China and South Korea became outpowering country compared to Japan. Now South Korea is neck and neck with Japan in terms of national power. So in this dynamic international relations, the level of international relations is changing constantly. So depending on this changing international condition, within domestic Japanese domestic politics, there are different opinions on adjusting level of policy. Some are beginning to take a serious approach about the past misdeed, and others wanted to have a more coordinated approach toward the Japanese past. So these two different perspectives are competing within Japan. Although I'm a Japanese So all the other Japanese people are also thinking about which direction should be taken. Professor Bae?
뭐
Thank you so much for your difficult question. What I can tell you is that
당시에 제가 강조하는 개념 중에 하나가
one of the concepts that I emphasize in daily
아시아의
life is
근현대사의 모순이 뭉쳐 있는데
there are many tangled contradictions when we talk about the history in East Asia.
시장을 치르는 데가 바로
Because of such contradictions,
모순이 엉켜 있는 것은 핵심행장이 되기 위한
because of the contradictions, people on the key sites suffer. In order to overcome contradictions,
조건과 주체적 조건이
the objective and subjective conditions come together to form a key site. As an expert on East Asia, I believe one of the key sites is Okinawa of Japan and Korea and the Taiwanese Strait in Taiwan. The Korean Peninsula is explained as a key site.
역사 전환기에
Through many cycles of transformations in East Asian history, the Korean Peninsula was very important site because it was one of the key sites. But if you do not have the autonomous power, you always fall as a victim.
동아시아 각 나라 중국과 일본이 내부의 변화를 겪습니다. 이런 식으로 동아시아 질서 변동의 중요한
Whenever there are order change in East Asia, Korean Peninsula was very important and served an important role. And 10-year-long colonization, there is a second transformation wave, and another one is the Korean War. And now we are embracing another wave of transformation. The first and second, we didn't have our self-reliant capacities and capabilities. Of course, because of the key site, we had to sacrifice because of the absence of the independent power and self-reliant power. For every transformation, it spans not just a single year, it spans a period from the first Sino-Japanese War to the Russo-Japanese War and the Korean War, and now. Throughout the history, the global orders changed, and the 1905 system was emphasized by the Japanese stakeholder. So this is not just the transformation in terms of the politics, it's also the transformation in terms of the civilization. The Japanese style modernization was born as well throughout the years. So transformation as well as the politics and the civilization is what I'm thinking. So Sino-Japanese War brought on the changes in civilization. Whenever there are civilizational classes, especially after the first Sino-Japanese War, there are new perspectives and new orders being discussed. From the 1904 and to 1910, I label it as a transformation, one cycle of transformation. I will dig deeper into this topic. We are running out of time, but if you really have to ask this question now, please do not hesitate. We have one question from Mr. Peck. It's not a question, but rather a comment. Now, Professor Peck talked about the global perspective, and education shall be shaped in such a manner. In South Jeolla Province, we have Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum taking place here. Our President Kim Dae-jung, as you may well know, is the most authentic Korean who had great passion for and love for the public and he had been recognized as the global leader, awarded with the he was Nobel laureate of peace. And our President Kim Dae-jung has been recognized as human heritage for the world to remember as the Nobel Peace Prize laureate. Through the shining star like President Kim Dae-jung, the world is paying attention to Korea and to this region, and people are coming to Korea and to this region. And through the recognition of a person and figure like Kim Dae-jung as Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Koreans can go out of Korea to talk about his philosophy and his thinking. So efforts are underway to continue the legacy of President Kim Dae-jung. Thank you so much for the opportunity to share my thoughts with you. We are really running out of time. So here goes the closing.
저는 뭐 이렇게 여러 이런 포럼이나 이런 행사에 참석하게 왔습니다.
I have many chances to attend forums and seminars, and typically on the third day and last day, we see less of the audience, and we only see speakers on the stage or at the podium in a typical case. However, I am so grateful to our audience who attended the last day of the Kim Dae-jung Peace Forum. The contents prepared and presented by our two speakers is not easy, but still, thank you so much for sitting through the presentations, even on the last day. We have about 2 minutes remaining. Professor Kimiya and Professor Park, any last words that you want to share with the audience?
아까 제가 말씀드린 바 가지고 후반부 20분
In the letter, I actually could not tell you about the latter part of my presentation as I prepared. We have intellectual and political legacy of Kim Dae-jung. He was able to balance between political reality and political imagination. In terms of the Korean Peninsula and the surrounding circumstances like Northeast Asia, he had a balanced perspective to overlooking the whole situation. I love President Roh Moo-hyun as well, but still, after the Kim Dae-jung administration, the subsequent South Korean governments were not really able to continue Kim Dae-jung's intellectual legacy. I'm not so sure what the Lee Jae-myung administration will leave the country. But I hope that this administration is expected to carry forward Kim Dae-jung's intellectual legacy. So I believe the Kim Dae-jung's intellectual and political legacy could be very valid for Korea to navigate through this crisis. I am a little bit optimistic about that.
혹시 책 광고라고 오해하지
Please do not mistake me for promoting my book, promoting a book. But I want to emphasize and introduce one book for you. As said before, I am working at the publisher 창작가 비평, and next year we are preparing to launch 30 books of the Korean history, from the Cheongdojeon to Joseon Dynasty, and all the Confucian scholars. And the last one is on President Kim Dae-jung. Please give me a big hand. Our publisher is publishing a volume of histories from the Joseon Dynasty to the modern history. The reason that I introduced this scheduled launch of the volume of history books is because our last book is on President Kim. He is the last piece of the puzzle of our history, and these books are not for scholars or experts. These books are for the public. So our initial goal is to publish them in Korean first, and then translate them in English. And K thinking needs to be exported just as we did with the K food and K culture and K-pop.
자, 그러면은 80분 동안 이 짧지 않은 시간 동안
We spent 80 minutes, which is not short.
연사분들 그리고 여러 중증
I'd like to take this opportunity to express my gratitude to our two speakers and to our kind audience. Thank you so much for your attendance.
국제 정치와 한반도 평화를 주제로
Thank you.
진행했던 이번 세션 수준 높은 강연.
We talked about the East Asian international politics and peace on the Korean Peninsula. This session was possible thanks to your kind attendance. I'd like to thank our moderator and two speakers. And we will have a short 10-minute break. And then we will move on to our last session, which is session 4. We will begin at 11 on sharp. Thank you.